I started to suffer from a lot of headaches, real bad headaches. And this went on for a period of 2-3 weeks, and my mental state wasn't great. And I went to the doctors, and the doctor took my blood pressure, and then he didn't say anything. He just picked the phone up and called for an ambulance. And I was like, oh my Lord. And 30 minutes later, I was in an ICU unit, all wired up, and stuff being pumped into me, and wires and bleeps going on everywhere.
Chris, it's very nice to be here in your office.
It's great to have you.
Thanks
really
for inviting us.
No problem.
We agreed to give a brief introduction of who we are. I'm Gijs, we just met. I'm a healthcare psychologist. I'm from OpenUp, the healthcare platform that works together with your company, BESTSELLER. Yes. And maybe you can give a brief introduction of yourself as well.
I'm Chris. I head up the e-commerce operation for BESTSELLER. BESTSELLER is a collection of different fashion brands, predominantly retail and wholesale. But here in Amsterdam, we host all the websites, approximately 235 websites across Europe. And out of this office here, we have approximately 150, 155 people. And this is the real heartbeat of our business at the moment, given the times that we're in.
We have agreed to talk about mental health, so I will ask some questions. I can also ask some personal questions. We're very grateful for that. Mental health is also a personal thing for a lot of people. How's your mental health at the moment?
That's a great question. At this moment in time, in fact, somebody asked me this morning, how are you doing, Chris? And my response was, I'm on top of the world. I'm in a real good space at the moment, simply because we've had an autumn-winter event a few days ago, which has been well received by the business, and I've got lots of interaction going on and lots of feedback from it. But prior to me arriving in Amsterdam a week ago, I'd spent the last 5-6 weeks on lockdown in the UK, lockdown at home, which was quite tough. I mean, the lockdown in the UK was a lot tougher than the lockdown here in the Netherlands. You effectively couldn't leave your home, apart from going to the food store. That was it. And now that mentally was very tough, and having to talk to people on the screen for 8-9 hours a day, it's not the same as sitting here and talking with people and having great interaction.
Yeah, I can imagine. And also the way I started to learn you are a man that also needs his freedom and his space. And
absolutely.
You told me you traveled a lot in life, and now you have the lockdown situation. How do you deal with such a situation?
It was exceptionally tough, especially given the fact that my wife is a key worker. So she was out all day, and sometimes she was out for several days in a row because she wasn't able to come home because of the COVID situation. But I do have a pastime that allows me to completely switch off. And the colleagues in this office will tell you that I'm a very avid gardener. And by gardener, I don't mean any gardening in general, I mean vegetables. I grow vegetables. That's my real passion. In particular, growing giant vegetables. So at home in the garden, I have a huge greenhouse, and I can just lock myself away from the world, close my laptop, switch off, and just go in my greenhouse and play with my plants.
Wow, that's very interesting and also very helpful.
It allows me just to switch off from the world and just go into a zone, into a different place, or just a world of my own, and just plant my seeds, cultivate my plants, and there's lots of jobs to do around the greenhouse and around my plot of land.
How did you discover that you had such a hobby or such a passion that works for you?
I think we may get into that as we get into the conversation a little bit further, because it helped me when I had a particular issue in my life.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think we'll get to that further in the conversation.
Yes.
But yeah, it's something that was suggested to me, and it really helped me when I was going through a very difficult period.
Okay. Shall we talk about it now already, or
it's entirely up to you?
Am I going too fast?
No, it's entirely up to you.
Okay. But when was this phase that you now described?
This phase was around about 12 years ago, 13 years ago. That's when when I started to have some mental health problems, and if I rewind much earlier than that, from the late 90s, early 2000, I changed jobs, and I went and I relocated as well from my home in the north of England to somewhere in the middle of England. I actually moved to Stratford, the home of Shakespeare. The day I started this company, I met a young guy there who started on the same day as me, and we became very, very good friends. He was from the north of England as well. He was 8-9 years younger than me. He was from the north of England as well, and we started to build a relationship together. Our backgrounds were very similar. My father was a coal miner. His father was a coal miner. You know, we both came from working class districts. We both supported the same football team. We both had the same beliefs in politics, and we shared the same love of food, the same foods we really enjoyed. And we grew to become real good soulmates, brothers almost, you know. And when I left that company after 3 or 4 years and I moved to another company, 6 months later, James came and worked for me again and became my number 2 at that company. And we started a small business together as well, a bit of a side hustle. We started to develop properties, and we were like brothers. We went on holiday together. We did everything together. Anyway, one morning I arrived at work and his car wasn't there. I was late and his car wasn't there, which I thought was a bit odd. He was the warehouse manager and I was the head of logistics for this company in the UK. And after about half an hour, reception called me and said, there's some police in reception. They want to talk to you. And I was like, oh, no. And then they came, they sat down. Anyway, what transpired was that James had been involved in a car accident, a very serious accident. And the family had asked for me to go to the hospital. And I got to the hospital, and just as I arrived at the hospital, he passed away. And that was, it was absolutely devastating. He had a young family as well. But the problem is that as well as James passing away, he was the warehouse manager in this warehouse, and he had a young team of managers that he'd recruited. So even though I was really upset and I went home and I actually cried for the first time ever in front of my wife, I hadn't got time to grieve. You know, I had to help the family, and I also had to keep the operation going, and I had to spend time with these young managers that had been recruited because they were all completely devastated. I had to bring some support in to help them, you know, and the whole period of 3 or 4 months after James's death, the toughest part of all was that I had to recruit a replacement for him, a new warehouse manager. And it was almost like trying to replace him as a warehouse manager, but also try and replace him as a friend and colleague as well, you know. Anyway, I found someone, a super, super nice guy, really, really good, really switched on. But once he started, then it was like, I can relax now. And that's when I started to have mental health issues myself. You know, I started to become ill. I started to suffer from a lot of headaches, real bad headaches. And this went on for a period of 2-3 weeks, and my mental state wasn't great. And I went to the doctors, and the doctor took my blood pressure, and then he didn't say anything. He just picked the phone up and called for an ambulance. And I was like, oh my Lord. And 30 minutes later, I was in an ICU unit, all wired up and stuff being pumped into me and wires and bleeps going on everywhere. And what transpired was I was suffering from extreme hypertension. I won't quote the numbers, but any normal person would not have survived that period. Anyway, 4 or 5 days later, I was sent home with a whole pile of drugs, and you know I had to keep checking in. And I ended up. I went to a very bad place, and night became day, and day became night. So I would sleep all day, and I'd be up alone all night. I didn't want to interact with anybody. I lived in darkness almost. You know, for a period of 3 or 4 weeks, and obviously my wife was very worried about that. And this was in the time when mental health help wasn't as readily available as it is nowadays. You know, there were no companies like your company. You know, and even though the organisation I was working for tried to reach out to me, it was just closed. I was living in my bedroom in darkness constantly. People were trying to reach out to me, friends. They could see things were not right. Anyway, the guy that I'd recruited as James's replacement managed to get me to go and meet him in a pub for a drink. Probably not the greatest thing to do, to give me a drink at that point. But I met him for a drink, and he said, come back to my parents' house. They live around the corner, and we'll just get out of the pub. And so I got there, and his father was in the greenhouse gardening. And I got talking to him, and I was amazed at how passionate he was about growing his tomatoes. And it just sparked something inside me. And I sort of woke up, for want of a phrase, and that's how I got into gardening. And it allowed me to, the job I do is an exceptionally stressful job. People don't realise this. They see me as the happy-go-lucky guy I'm trying to motivate and cheer everybody up. But no one motivates me or cheers me up. But I find my pleasure in gardening. It allows me to, just, like I said before, just shut off from the world and just put everything out of my head and just concentrate on something that's creative and different.
Thanks for sharing your personal story.
No problem.
It is also for you. It's a life-changing story.
Oh, hugely.
Yeah.
Hugely. It was a very, very tough period of my life. You know, and I'm a very strong person. People see me as a strong person, and people look up to me, and I have to look out for a lot of people. You know, I view that the people that work in the organisation I head up are part of my family. You know, I treat them exactly the same as I treat my family at home, and that can be super stressful.
Can imagine. You bear a lot of responsibility in your role.
Oh my, yeah. And sometimes I have good days and bad days like everybody else, you know. And some days I go home and I think, do you know what? Why do I do this? Why don't I just set myself up as an eBay trader and just have some kind of lifestyle living or lifestyle business rather than do this? But I love helping people. I love people, you know, and I love. I've reached a point in my life, career-wise, where most of the organisations know this anyway. But I view my input to this business now is about helping people to be the best that they can be, because I've only got to my level through people giving me help along the way and giving me that little bit of a nudge and that little bit of push and sort of dragging me out when I'm feeling a bit down and dusting me off and pushing me in the right direction again. And I see that more, that's more what I like to do now. What I get most enjoyment out of now is helping people on their life journey.
I think it's very important that you share this story because you're one of the leaders in the company.
Yes.
And people look at you as an example, as someone they can look up to, but also they can learn from. And I think this is a very important lesson that you have learned and that you're now also transferring to the company. How would you describe your lesson?
Well, it's really set me up for to deal with life, really. It changed my outlook on life. It changed my outlook in the way that now I live for today and not for tomorrow. I'm very much an optimist. But what it did do as well, it set me up to help me through further times in my life. Everybody goes through ups and downs in their lives. Everybody will get to a point sometimes where it's really bad. And for me, there are many examples in my life after James's death, after that dark period, where I sailed through. For example, my wife got cancer 4 years ago. You know, she had breast cancer, and it was touch and go for a while, but I was really strong through all of that because I'd been in that dark place a long time ago, and I'd learned how to deal with that. You know, and I had a colleague of mine when I was at Ted Baker who got cancer and passed away, unfortunately. But I learned to handle that, and I learned to do. It made me much stronger as a person. And I think I think even though mental health is more open nowadays, even the name of your company, OpenUp, it's a lot more open now, and people are suffering from it a lot more. When I started my career, mental health was a taboo subject. You know, I was in the UK and I was working in a working class area of the UK where everybody had to be tough, you know, and if you admitted that you had mental health problems, you'd be seen as weak, you know, and there was no help available in those days. And that's when I started my career, that's what it was like. And it's super good now that we can engage with a company like you guys, because I think even during COVID times, it's even more important now that people have access to the kind of help that you can give them.
Yeah, we agree, and we also see that in the people that use our service. Right? So we see an increase in the use of the service also in this COVID period. And if I go to your story, you said a very important thing. You said, I learned that you live today and not tomorrow.
Yes.
And also you say it's very important to be open.
Yeah.
Basically. So not to have mental health as a taboo, but also to open up.
Yes.
These are two important lessons I think we can give to the people that work in your company. Are there any more lessons that you say, hey, this is something that I also want to address?
I think in today's society now, we have a lot of young people that work in this organisation now, and this is the youngest environment I've ever worked in. That's not true, actually. I worked in the UK for a Pretty Little Thing, who are very, very young. But this organisation, they're very young. I mean, I'm sort of the father of the organisation, for want of a phrase, by at least 20 years, you know. And I think young people today have a lot more pressure than what I had when I was that age. Huge amount of pressure. I mean, this device in my pocket is within itself brings pressure on young people, you know. And what I would say to people in this organisation is first of all, one, be yourself. Don't try and be something that you're not. Just be yourself. People can see me. People know I'm transparent. People know who I am. They know my strengths. They know my weaknesses. They know my faults. So be yourself. And the second thing I would say is don't be afraid to talk to people. Please do not be afraid to talk to people, because it's super important. I mentioned at the start of this, when I'm back at home in the UK, I struggle to cope with 5 or 6 weeks locked in my little office talking to a screen. You know, I'm at my best mentally when I'm here in Amsterdam, meeting people and talking to people and interacting. You know, and it's a great tonic, interacting and talking to people. It really is.
Yeah, we completely agree, and I think it's very important that you share this for the company. I hope also that there's a culture in which people can talk to each other in the company.
That's what we're trying to build.
Yeah.
You know, and I've only been in this I've been leading this organisation for 10 months now, nearly 11 months. It'll be a year in February. But one of the things I've tried to do over the last year is to try and make it a more open organisation, and not just about your own personal issues, but just generally about work. You know, I want people to be empowered. I want people to not be frightened of throwing an idea on the table, no matter how ridiculous it is. You know, I want people to talk and open up and be part of this organisation we're trying to create here. So it's super, super important.
Yeah. I get very much inspired by your story. I'm a psychologist, and we make psychology very easily accessible to people.
Yep.
So that's also what we believe in. We hope that people share among each other what they are suffering from, or what they're in work they're struggling from. But sometimes they don't feel encouraged enough to share it with each other, and then it can be helpful to have a professional or somebody
Yes.
that you can anonymously
a lot of people, you know, for me it's easy. I can open up. A lot of people can't open up, but I would encourage people to try their best to open up and find the right person to talk to if you need to.
Thanks for sharing this with us.
No problem.
I think this was, for me at least, these were the important issues to address. I think this was the right thing we wanted to share also, so thank you for your openness. And of course, if one of the people in your company have questions about the psychology, about OpenUp, they can always address to me or to one of my colleagues with questions.
Absolutely, yes.
And that's very easy, from 9 in the morning till 9 in the evening, and also in the weekends via the internet, so it can be really easy for
Yes.
everybody to do.
And that's the whole point of why we've embarked on this partnership. You know, we really want to, given the times we're in at the moment with COVID and people, you know, working from home, and you know, I was laughing and joking with one of our colleagues earlier in the coffee bar, where we were talking about the annual event that we had on Friday, the autumn winter event, and this guy was saying that it was super great. He said, but when it finished, I realised I'm sat there at home alone in my bedsit, and I've got 6 cans of beer that are empty. And I'm sat here with a Christmas hat on, and the screen's blank in front of me now, and what do I do? You know? And that made me think that, you know what, it is quite lonely, so reach out, you know, given the times we're in at the moment.
Thank you very much, Chris.
No problem. Thank you for coming.